friends, and welcome to yet another episode of Drama Talkies, where we are going to review a new play. It's called A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. Streetcar Named Desire was one of the most critically acclaimed plays and a blockbuster hit. First performed on Broadway on December 3rd, 1947. It ran for 855 performances and closed in 1949. It had multiple adaptations across various mediums: films, opera, ballet, and television. It won the 1948 New York Drama Critics Circle Award for Best Play. It also won the 1948 Pulitzer Prize for Drama. The inspiration for the title came from an actual streetcar called Desire. It was a Desire line which ran from 1920 to 1940 across New Orleans. Okay, so now let's talk a little about the author, Tennessee Williams, who is behind this beautiful, extraordinary play. Tennessee Williams is one of the widely acclaimed American playwrights of the 20th century. Before this play, Williams had written The Glass Menagerie in 1945, which brought him instant fame. His popularity rose even further with this play, A Streetcar Named Desire, which followed soon after and was an immediate hit. Some of his other popular plays are Summer and Smoke, A Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, The Rose Tattoo, among many others. Tennessee Williams, as a writer, is the distiller of the complexities of human nature. The human nature which may be, listen to this carefully, it's very interesting. The human nature which may be as delicate as a Japanese haiku at one moment, and the next moment as brutal as the mother helplessly having to watch the murder of her child. This, to Williams, is the part of the realism-idealism dichotomy of existence. Also, his theatre productions represented the theatre of expressionism, or plastic theatre as it came to be known, where the audience had a deeper experience of the emotional truth of the situation. In Streetcar Named Desire, the lighting and music was appropriately used at different points to bring out this expressionism, this mood of the scene. There was an extensive use of shadows on the wall, loud cries, lights going dim and bright, background music of the blue piano and Varsovian polka to express the various moods of the situations the characters plunged into, especially Blanche with her mental breakdown. Now, one of the early lines in the play are, "What's the matter, honey? Why are you lost?" And yes, that's what defines the protagonist, Blanche's strife, in one word. It's a story about a woman who is single, insecure, and on the brink of losing her sanity after braving through the exhausting years of financial struggles and a loveless life. A highly intelligent, sharp, and educated woman who, in her own words, got lost in the trap of casting her pearls before swines. Yet, what eventually becomes her battle is the illusion with which she creates and lives in an imaginary wondrous life, suppressing the harsh realities that keeps knocking her down. Now, the play has primarily four main characters. One is Blanche Dubois, then her sister Stella, who is married to Stanley Kowalski, and his friend Mitch. Blanche Dubois is a woman in her 30s who, after having dealt with life's blows one after the other to the point of being left emotionally distraught, now decides to seek refuge in her sister Stella's arms. That's where the story begins. The first scene is when Blanche has reached Stella's house. The play is divided into 11 scenes. and begins with Blanche reaching Stella's house, which is located in a humble neighborhood called Elysian Fields in New Orleans. Stella, her sister, is a woman in her 20s who, even though comes from an upper class family like her sister, is happily married and content with her working class lifestyle. She is gentle, calm, and emotionally mature. As an aristocratic, Blanche warms up to adjust in her sister's small two-rooms house separated by a mere curtain partition. So we get an idea of the setting of Stella's house, which is a two-room apartment, and actually it is one big room partitioned by a mere curtain. We see Blanche trying hard to digest the cultural shock that she is processing around her sister's shabby environment. Not only the house, but it's her sister's husband, Stanley Kowalski, a rustic, rugged, working-class man who is aggressive with loud mannerisms and animalistic demeanor, and whom she finds completely out of sync to her urban, refined upbringing. And this class difference brings up much acrimony in their relationship right from the beginning. Now, during the initial conversations with Stella, Blanche reveals about her exhausting state of affairs in the last few years. That how she tried so hard to save their childhood home, Belle Reve, but lost the plantation while gathering funds for the sickness and the subsequent cremations of their family members. The stress also led her to resign temporarily from her job as an English teacher. And now, with no shelter and money, she has come to seek refuge at her sister's house. Stella empathizes with her and welcomes her with open arms and drinks to help her settle down. When Stanley gets to know through Stella about Belle Reve's tragic loss, he suspects that Blanche is cooking up a story to usurp Stella's share of the property and confronts Blanche directly under the Napoleon Code. Now, what is Napoleon Code? That whatever belongs to the wife also belongs to the husband. So he confronts her and insists that he be shown the sale deed of the property. Blanche, in response, hands over all the property papers to Stanley, and that's when it becomes clear that indeed the property was lost on a mortgage, as the loan amount against it could not be paid off. Now, Stanley sheepishly reveals at that point that Stella is going to have a baby, and therefore he was keen to know about the property to build up some security for themselves. The following evening, Stanley organizes a poker night along with his friends Mitch, Steve, and Pablo over drinks and chips. Stella decides to head out with Blanche for a supper so as to leave the men alone with their game. When they return at 2:30 a.m., the party is still on. Mitch strikes a brief conversation with Blanche and sparks fly between them. Now, Mitch, despite also being from the working class background, is complete opposite of Stanley. He's warm, he's gentle, and he is extremely sensitive. Soon this revelry turns into a full-blown fight when Stanley, in a drunken stupor, angrily turns off the music put on by Blanche and throws the radio off the window. Stella gets livid and calls off the party. To this, Stanley retaliates by hitting at her. An astounded Blanche ushers out a crying Stella to their neighbor Eunice's house upstairs, while Stanley's friends put him under the shower to cool him down. And then they leave the place. Once sobered up, Stanley howls out for Stella multiple times, profusely apologizing until she comes down from Eunice's house. The madly in love couple soon patches up and goes back inside the house to sleep. Meanwhile, as a shocked Blanche steps down looking for Stella, she bumps into Mitch on the dark street outside the house. Together they smoke a cigarette. Blanche thanks Mitch for his kindness. She remarks, "I need kindness." The next morning, Blanche enters the house after a sleepless night. and is astonished at the calming forgiveness with which Stella has let go of Stanley's behavior of the last night. Stella finds nothing wrong in it and considers it to be a part and parcel of any marital life. However, Blanche avows to pull them both out of this mess and decides to call an old rich friend who can bail them out financially by setting up some business for them. Stella discards her proposal and asserts that she truly loves her husband and sees no problem in staying with him. Blanche goes on to judge Stanley harshly, calling him common, primitive, and bestial, and in completely contrast to their own sophisticated and cultured upbringing. Little did she and Stella realize that Stanley had walked in through the front door while they were talking in the inside room and had stealthily listened to all of Blanche's harsh comments about him. The next morning, Stanley informs Blanche about a man he met. So he does some digging up regarding Blanche. Stanley goes ahead and does that. And the next morning, he comes home and informs Blanche about a man he met named Shaw from Laurel, who claims to have known her. This news discreetly rattles Blanche. However, she feverishly denies knowing him and asserts that the man must be mistaken. However, after Stanley has left, she admits to Stella about her not so good reputation in the last 2 years, where she had to seduce men in order to get shelter and money. Stella doesn't take her too seriously and calms her down. Blanche then changes the topic and she excitedly starts talking about her upcoming date with Mitch later in the evening and hopes that their relationship works out. Stella assures it will and then goes out to join Stanley and their friends for an outing. Soon Mitch arrives with a bunch of roses. In the next scene, we see that their date to an amusement park turns out to be both dull and tiring, with each one of them trying to put an act of having fun for the sake of the other. By the time they finish off their date and reach the house, it's about 2 a.m. Stanley and Stella are still out. They discuss about their personal lives. Mitch talks about his sick mom who wishes to see him married before she dies. Blanche talks about her loneliness ever since she lost the love of her life at a very, very young age. Her husband Alan, a young boy, had been caught cheating on her with another guy, and later he commits suicide because of his homosexuality getting discovered by Blanche and she feeling disgusted about it. That breaks his heart and he commits suicide. Mitch proposes that they both need companionship and can consider being together. Blanche gets emotional about this and they embrace and kiss each other. Soon, it's Blanche's birthday. While Blanche takes a long bath for her big day, Stella decorates her birthday cake for a party in the evening. Mitch is also invited. Just then, now Stanley has been after Blanche all this while, gathering more information about her because he suspects something is wrong about her or her background. So he just then thunders in with a bag full of murky details about Blanche's recent past, which he gathered from a supply man in his office who used to frequently visit Laurel, the same place where Blanche came from, and used to stay in a hotel called Flamingo. And it's the same hotel where Blanche was staying before she was washed off as poison from that place. And that's when she had come to them. So Stanley informs Stella about her sister's bad reputation, menacingly known for her promiscuous and immoral ways of alluring men in order to win their favors. He also revealed about her affair with a 17-year-old student, which when caught led to her being thrown out from the school. So unlike what Blanche had told Stella that she had taken a temporary break from her job, it was actually Not true. She was thrown out from that school after her affair with a 17-year-old boy got discovered. Now, Stanley further informs Stella that he has shared these details with Mitch as well. So, in order to safeguard his friend from Blanche, Stella is left completely heartbroken on hearing this. Now, Blanche, who is unaware of what has been transpired all this while because she's taking bath inside, when she later comes in, she sits embarrassed at being stood up by Mitch when he doesn't turn up for the party later in the evening. She gets another blow when Stanley mockingly hands her birthday present, which is a one-way bus ticket for her to go back to Laurel. Unable to control her grief, she rushes to the bathroom. Stella cries and fights with Stanley for being so mean to her sister. Imagine on her birthday, he gives her a ticket to go back to Laurel. What can be meaner than that? Now, Stanley pacifies her by telling that it's important that her sister leaves so that they can again go back to their happy ways of living. Because according to Stanley, ever since Blanche has come in their space, they have been fighting more often. Stella, however, is not able to handle the stress and the tension in the house and soon goes into labor, and Stanley rushes her to the hospital. In the meanwhile, Blanche, we see later in the night, is sitting disheveled in the middle of the night nursing a drink when Mitch walks in disillusioned. Of course, he's very disturbed about all that he's been told by Stanley about Blanche's background. And he confronts her about her stories and the lies that she had told him. Blanche breaks down and admits that after Alan's, her husband's death, she felt very lost. And in an emotionally cathartic moment, she reveals the miseries life doled out on her one after the other, and that her intimacies with strangers were all desperate attempts to fill her empty heart with protection and love. Mitch embraces her in empathy, but claims at the same time that he can't marry her anymore, as she's not clean enough to take home to his mother. However, he still expresses that he wishes to have sex with her like all the other men. And this shatters Blanche, of course, and she asks him to leave right away. As the night proceeds, a heavily drunk Blanche, after all that has transpired, she's had a very rough day, and now she's heavily drunk. And she begins to pack her trunk while dressing up in a white gown. Stanley comes home to take a break as Stella will be laboring until morning. So he's come back home to take some rest. Blanche makes a vain attempt to pull together her shredded self-image in front of him by announcing that she has been telegrammed by a rich old friend from Dallas for a vacation and she's getting ready to leave. Stanley pierces through her illusionary talks and calls out all her bluffs and deceits and lies. Brutally pierces her. He says there was indeed no telegram. He shouts at her. Being shaken back to reality hits Blanche very hard. She is torn apart at her facade of lies being shattered so brutally by Stanley. The room is filled with howling strange cries and ghastly shadows crawling over the walls. The Vesuvian polka music, which was playing when her husband had committed suicide, haunts back again in her head. The whole atmosphere now reflects her complete nervous breakdown. Stanley takes advantage of her state and lustily forces himself on her. Blanche tries to put up a hard fight, but her frail self fails against Stanley's brute force. The last nail in the coffin has been struck. Stanley has taken his revenge on Blanche. In the last scene, which occurs a few days after this incident. We see a heartbroken Stella packing Blanche's stuff. By now, Blanche has completely slipped into a delusional state and believes that she is being picked up by her old rich friend, Shep, as she's getting ready. Whereas in reality, Blanche is actually being sent to a mental institution. Stella wonders if she can actually continue to stay with Stanley if she believes in Blanche's story about him raping her. Eunice, her neighbor from upstairs house, asks Stella to put a blind eye on that gruesome incident and continue her life with Stanley and her newborn baby. After all, life must keep going on, as she remarks. Finally, the doctor and matron arrive to take Blanche away. Blanche initially rebels with shock, but eventually relents when the doctor addresses her with kindness. As she walks out, holding his arm, she reiterates once again a statement which actually forms the essence of this play. She says, "Whoever you are, I have always depended on the kindness of strangers." With this, we come to the end of the story. To conclude it, I would say that Tennessee Williams has managed to very sensitively pull out the ever-present dichotomy of human existence, that of realism versus idealism. The same dichotomy that unfortunately Blanche could not catch hold of and balance out, what usually people try to do, balancing things across. But instead, she fell prey to the trap of repeatedly churning up an idealistic world for herself while her reality kept slipping away, eventually destroying her brutally in the process. Blanche's route from Laurel to reach her sister's house in New Orleans very well sums up her journey. In her own words from the play, she says, "They told me to take a streetcar named Desire and transfer to one called Cemeteries and ride 6 blocks and get off at Elyson Fields." Thank you.